Welcome back to the Natural Wellness Tips Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Jennifer Shaw. I am super excited to be here with you today to dive into yet another fascinating conversation. One of my favorite things is getting to share with you guys the things I'm working through, the things I'm going through, what's coming up in my life, because my hope is that by sharing those parts of my journey, that you can gain knowledge from them and that you can feel empowered by them, right? Like maybe a little bit of it resonates with something you're going through in your life. So let's dive on into the topic today. I want to talk about falling in love with our flaws today. And this just came up for me recently, like in multiple different occasions, and we're going to dive all into it. But you guys, if you're new to the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe so you get notified each week when I drop a new podcast. And if you're returning to the podcast, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this community and being here to listen to what I have to share, because it just fills me up knowing so many of you tune into this show. So let me ask you this. Have you ever asked your inner circle what areas in your life you could improve in? What flaws you have? What they don't like about you? They're super weird questions, right? But I can tell you that when you ask them, you can learn some fascinating things about yourself. But why would you ask these questions, right? It's interesting. It's not only do you find fascinating things about yourself, but you find out fascinating things about society and how we respond to these types of questions. But anyway, a few months ago, I bought this book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. And I bought it after I was finishing another book. And in the back of the book, the author had listed 5 books that had changed their lives. And they were like, you should read all these too. And I was like, well, I don't have that one. So I bought it. I didn't really have an emotional connection to reading it. I had just purchased it. And it sat on my bookshelf for a couple months. When my boyfriend came to me and said, I just started listening to this book on audiobook and it's so fascinating. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And he's like, it's called The Dark Side of Light Chasers. And I was like, that sounds really familiar. First, I looked in my Amazon cart because sometimes when I want to buy a book, I put it in my Amazon cart, just so I can go back and remember it. And it wasn't there. And then I went in my bookshelf and I found it on my bookshelf. And I was like, oh, there it is. Divine timing. I was meant to read that book now. I was meant to look into it and have this experience, right? It was the right time for me. It has been opening my eyes to parts of me that I've hid away for years, parts of me that I was honestly really ashamed of, parts of me that were present when I was in survival mode and just getting by, and parts of me that have served me really well at times in my life, but parts of me that I have labeled as flaws or shut off from me and the rest of the world, or tried really hard to shut off from me or the rest of the world, right? The problem with this is when we do that, when we avoid, when we turn our backs on parts of our personalities, they tend to show up in our lives even more. Guys, think about one trait that you don't like about yourself, and then ask yourself how often you see that trait in others around you. Think about how often it rears its ugly head up for you. Does that trait that you don't really like about yourself, does that come up when you're at your best or at your worst? Because my guess is it comes up when you're at your worst. It comes up when you can't, keep the door closed on those parts of you. You can't keep them under control, under wraps, right? And it's so interesting how we spend so much time and energy trying to avoid parts of ourselves as if we are flawed. So my point of this conversation today is that we spend so much time thinking about what we can improve on, what we like about ourselves, and all of that's great, but we have shunned these traits and they're just following us around, waiting to jump in, usually at the worst time, to remind us that they're still there. Think of it this way. What does a child do when they want attention and are not getting it? Oftentimes they act up, right? If a child's needs are not being met at home, a lot of times they act up at school. What they're seeking is attention. And oftentimes these children have learned that the only way to get attention is to act out. And we duplicate that cycle for them. That's what we teach them. And then that's exactly what we're doing here as adults, right? These personality traits, these flaws, quote unquote, that we have for ourselves, that we view of ourselves, come up when it is the least opportune time for them to come up, when we're under large amounts of stress, when we're in a heated discussion. They rear their ugly head for us. And we have no choice but to recognize they're there. But then we quickly are like, oh, I hate this part of me. I don't want to see this part of me. Go away, this part of me. So let's think about our emotions, our personality traits that same way, right? Like, for instance, I have this thing where I have this hurry up mentality that creeps up. It's something I'm aware of. It's something that I've tried to eliminate. I've even talked about it here on the podcast. But I'm recognizing now, maybe that's the wrong way to go about it, right? When I think about this hurry up mentality, I think about this habit I have where I try to beat the clock, even when there is no clock to beat. And I think about, when I'm doing something fun, how I'm like in this beat the clock mentality. When I'm on vacation, at times I can be in this beat the clock mentality. It pulls me out of the present moment. And it's something that I don't necessarily love about myself. And yeah, it's something that I struggle with. But I'm learning now to look at this differently. How is beating the clock, being in a hurry, or being super efficient with my time help me in life? And I can think of quite a few opportunities where that has truly helped me, right? But the biggest one for me is in my work. I have always been very timely and productive at my jobs and even in my business, right? It's earned me awards. It's earned me accolades, positive reviews from my bosses. It's even helped me so much in creating a successful business from home. How many people start trying to build businesses from home and they can't be efficient with their time? They're chasing all the squirrels and they get nothing done. Like, sometimes I could be a little too efficient. Sometimes I can be a little too driven by my to-do list, by the clock that I need to beat, right? And when I can soften those things a little bit, so much can change, right? When I think about it, I'm actually really grateful for this trait. I've never missed a flight. I've never been late to an important meeting, right? However, I have to embrace that it has also hindered me as well. It can negatively impact my relationships, my stress level, even my ability to empathize with others. This trait is not all positive, and it is not all negative. But if I focus on all the bad and shun this personality trait, I'm telling myself this one part of me is flawed and it is not good enough. It needs to be eliminated. But let's shift that. I'm going to be grateful for this trait, love it for supporting me, and take back the ability to use this trait when desired and let it be the benchmark for when, let it take the bench for when it's not needed. Let it sit to the sideline when it is not needed. But that all comes from acknowledging it and loving it, not shunning it and trying to leave it behind, right? We have to look at it and say, I see your strengths and I see your weaknesses. It was fascinating for me when in the book, she asked me to reach out to some friends and some family and ask them their 3 favorite things about me and their 3 least favorite things about me. What was most fascinating is how unsure of the negatives each and every one of these people were. They said they needed time to think about it. They said they really needed to put thought into it. And I love that about my circle. The other thing that was really fascinating was how much they apologized or worried before expressing their flaws. They all sent apology text messages before texting me the flaws, letting me know how much they love me, letting me know how much they cared about me, right? And it made me think about how we take things so personally in this society. We internalize those things shared with us, those things said to us, especially the ones we don't like hearing. We often get defensive and put up walls. However, I'm so grateful to hear these words and guidance from my friends. I don't know that I would have always been able to receive this so gracefully as I did now, but that really goes back to the divine timing of me picking up this book, of me diving in and being ready to embrace my shadow, my dark side, my flaws. Things come into our lives when we're ready to hear them. Things come into our lives when we need to hear them. Sometimes we might not be ready for them. Sometimes we pick up a book and start reading it, and then we put it down, and then we don't finish it for another 6 months. And that's okay, guys. But my friends didn't tell me anything that I didn't know about myself. But what I heard through it all was, you are not perfect, but I love you wholeheartedly anyways. And after years of believing that love was conditional, after years of believing that I had to be a certain person in order to receive love, I had to have certain accomplishments, check certain boxes, have a certain personality in order to be loved. I mean, my entire life, I have felt this way. This exercise taught me that I have surrounded myself with incredible people who love me unconditionally. And that was the biggest lesson I learned. And that's life-changing to me. That I have cultivated a partnership with Owen where love is unconditional. My friendships, love is unconditional. The people I allow to have intimate access to me love me unconditionally. So let us stop taking things so personally. Let us embrace our strengths and our flaws. Let us love unconditionally, not only ourselves, or not only others, but also ourselves, right? I also was reminded that others' opinions of us are simply a reflection of their reality. One of my friends said to me an area of weakness was that I talk very fast. Then she went on to say that there's a part of her that is actually jealous because she tends to talk slower, be a little more wordy in her explanations. And the funny thing is, that's something I absolutely love about her. We have to start remembering that every strength is a weakness and every weakness is a strength. We just have to take enough steps back from all of it to see it from above, to see that those things that are strengths for us are also weaknesses. Those things that are weaknesses for us are also strengths. We're absolutely perfect. We're evolving beings that deserve to be loved. And as I say often, that all of this starts with us. If we do not love ourselves unconditionally, how can we expect others to? And when I look back at my past, I never loved myself unconditionally. I finally do. And now that I love myself unconditionally, I have drawn people into my life that love me unconditionally. And damn, that's freaking powerful. It's such a reminder that every single thing starts with us. If you believe you are a victim in any way, shape, or form, take a step back and recognize that that all starts with you. It's not easy. It's not easy to take extreme ownership of your life. It is not easy. It is never going to be easy to take extreme ownership of your life. But we have to start trying. And I hope that something in this messaging will help you take that next step in trying. So listen, grab your rose or your geranium or your bergamot, take a few deep breaths, and remind yourself that you are loved. You are perfect. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. These oils, rose, geranium, bergamot, are the oils of love, of self-acceptance. That is so important. It all starts with you. So if you're a parent, if you are in a relationship and you're asking for unconditional love, but you don't love yourself unconditionally, if you want to give your children unconditional love, but you don't love yourself unconditionally, you cannot do it. You cannot give to others what you don't give to yourself. So find the ways to love yourself unconditionally. I've talked about so many different things: journaling, meditation, having these conversations, reading these books, listening to these podcasts, grabbing these oils and sitting in front of the mirror and telling yourself that you are perfect. I love you. She has some amazing exercises in this book that include the mirror and working through some of these traits that are a little emotionally driven for you. Do it, right? Grab your forgive oil. Place a drop in the diffuser, put it over your heart. Forgive yourself for being so hard on yourself, for beating yourself up, for shunning those parts of you for so long. And honestly, if this conversation excited you, if it lit anything up inside of you, go pick up this book. You guys know I'm a big reader. I freaking love to read. I haven't been able to put this book down since I picked it up. And it takes a little time to go through because she has exercises that you need to do. Right. So right now I'm working through some of the exercises to really embrace those hidden personalities of me. She calls them subpersonalities, to really embrace them. Right. And when we can embrace them is when we can truly find that love and acceptance for ourselves. So I beg you, for your own emotional health, for your own physical health, your own spiritual health, your own overall journey in this thing called life, love yourself. And if you're called to, pick up this book. So I'll close this podcast with one quick quote from Debbie Ford. The purpose of this journey is to restore ourselves in wholeness. The purpose of this journey is to restore ourselves in wholeness, right? To wholeness. So we want to tell everybody else what's wrong with them, and we want to point fingers in all of the directions, but everything needs to be pointed at us. Everything starts here. We are the only ones that control our destiny. I am so in love with this journey of self-discovery. And I hope that my sharing as I go through it empowers you to do the same for yourself. You guys, let me know if you read this book. Message me on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever you can message me. Let me know, are you going to pick up this book? Are you going to read it? Let me know about your journey through this book. It's so fascinating. I love when a book impacts my life so much that I'm like, I have to share it. And I love that I have this forum in order to share these messages with each and every one of you. So I hope that you have the most beautiful rest of your day and know that you are loved unconditionally. And you need to love yourself. You get to love yourself unconditionally because you are worth it. I'll catch you guys next time on the podcast. Namaste.